Okay, we're just waiting here on getting the stream going. Make sure that your mic is muted if you're not speaker at this point. Okay, then I guess we will begin. So welcome everyone to our VWEC Metaverse Expert Series. We're so glad to see you and join us for today's very interesting presentation and discussion. For those of you who are new, our new website is in the chat, and you can find VWEC on many social media channels. Including this one. Our new website is in the getting some feedback here. Sandar, could you mute your mic? Sandar, could you mute your mic? Okay, thank you. So after our presentation, we will move to the deck for a more informal conversation and social time for those who are able to stay. We are so pleased to offer our expert series presentations in both text and chat. Text for all those that use voice is shared on our YouTube live stream. Do we have the URL for that? I forgot to get that. We'll put it in the chat in a second. And then you can find information on the sign in front of the stage as well. There it is. So there's the YouTube channel if you want to watch it with captions on. So speaking of signs, we'd like to know how you found out about our events. Our survey plant has just a quick survey that is of great help to us. If you could please fill that out and feel free to send it along with any comments you have. We would like to thank you all for joining us for this very interesting presentation, and I'm happy to introduce our Metaverse expert speaker to you, Barry Spencer, also known as Skipper Abel here in Second Life. Barry graduated in 1990 with a bachelor's in technology and began teaching physics in 1991. At Bromley College, he led IT courses, delivered University of Greenwich programs, and implemented Moodle in 2004. Since 2006, he has used Second Life for teaching. In 2013, he became college lead for the QAA MOOC network and developed training for learning materials. He earned a master's in education in virtual worlds in 2017 and became a senior fellow of the Higher Education Academy and continues creating virtual resources with VWER. So Barry, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Anvans, for that really nice introduction. And hello, everyone. And I'm really pleased to have been invited here to speak with you, and welcome. The project I'm going to discuss with you today, excuse me, we've gone to the wrong way, sorry. Today is, hold on, right, okay, is learning with virtual world simulations. Now, this was a project that we ran for our students, and I'll cover those in a bit more detail shortly. And the idea was that, as I've been trying to do since I joined SL in 2006, establish what I refer to as a 3D learning space of Second Life or Open Simulator in mainstream course delivery. So it becomes an application of choice rather than something that is only really used by very few. There have been varying degrees of success with that, I have to say. So let's begin. I'm going to look at the rationale or brief version of it that I used in order to attract the buy-in not only from my colleagues, staff and lecturers, but equally, or maybe more important, the management into taking a risk with this new technology at the time, and of course the students, because students have, many of them, been in gaming environments, but they are always really surprised when they're presented with the environment of Second Life as a learning tool. And we have carried out a number of projects here. The idea is that the learning would take place using a series of in-world simulations. There would be no traditional teaching in that sense, no lectures, no handouts. There would be a brief introduction, as you will see. I'll just move on to the next slide now. The students themselves, the cohort, it was a combined group of level 4 and 5 foundation degree students in software development. There were 14 students in all. They were all male students and post 19 years of age. Now, for those of you maybe not familiar with the education system in the UK, a foundation degree is a franchise from a university. We were working with the University of Greenwich, and it represented the first 2 years of their full degree program in software engineering. Once the students had completed the foundation degree, which was 2 years, they could then, if they chose, go on to the third year, joining the university students, and get their full BSc in computing. If they chose not to, then they would graduate with a foundation degree. It really replaced, or ran alongside of, it depends where you are running these courses, what would used to be the HND, Higher National Diploma, which is also level 4, level 5. So I hope that kind of explains the way the system works. Now, following the completion of our virtual world learning, the students would produce a desktop application. Because it was a software development course, the application would be written in the Java programming language and would be able to model the physical and working characteristics of a reflecting telescope. Why did we choose that? Well, we chose it because after asking some questions, though not too obviously among the students, it was clear that none of them actually had any knowledge of that. So this was a good starting place, and it was a level playing field, as they say, for everyone. The grading for the assessment, and you'll see some of this later, it was really the design, the coding and the testing of that Java program, which ran on the desktop. It did not run in the virtual world. The virtual world was simply a way of them learning the physics of a reflecting telescope. Okay, so that was the purpose. Okay, if we're okay, I'll move on to the next slide. Orientation, really important, I've found in these projects. Some will have experienced these type of environments before, but because we had the luxury, I guess, of running the simulator, which is OpenSim, on our own servers, it was not grid enabled, which meant our students were not able to teleport out to anybody else's grid, and similarly people on other grids couldn't teleport into ours. It was a closed system. We downloaded a shopping mall and we introduced students to the space and showed them how to change their appearance, how to change clothes, customize their avatars. In one of the sessions, we then gave them about a week where they could explore and, I guess, play around with the virtual space. I found in the past, if you don't do that and give them that acclimatization period, the fun kind of spills over into the learning, and you want them to be a bit more serious once the actual assessment starts. So we give them a week to play, have fun and explore, and that worked extremely well. There is a case study research paper associated with this, and I'll give you the link later on, that it goes into more detail and qualifies it with some citations as well. You may be interested to know. Aims and objectives for the project. Well, to implement a self-contained learning simulations that facilitate instruction, feedback and assessment. And I'll cover that as we go through the slides in a moment. So it wasn't just them learning. I wanted the system to give them some feedback and also give them the opportunity, not just for formative assessment, but for some summative assessment. They were given some small amount of marks toward their final grade if they submitted enough of those to us, and they, generally speaking, they did. It needed to provide a self-paced and collaborative learning space, and I'll come to that in a moment, because we've got some evidence for you where you can look at the nature of that collaboration. The students will acquire the necessary skills and competency of telescope modelling. Those are the three things. If we could achieve those, then I felt it was a successful project. The collaborative part I just mentioned, I'd captured the text chat in the virtual world, and I've downloaded it onto a note card, and it's, if you touch on the board for this event, there'll be a couple of note cards there. You can have a look at the conversations. It's all anonymized, so the students are protected. You won't find out their actual names, but you can see the conversations they were having. You can see that collaboration was taking place. It's amusing in places, it's repetitive in others, and very predictable in some. But enough lines of conversation there, I felt, to be useful in that sense. So please feel free to click on that board and grab your copy and have a read. Learning space. That was something I did think about quite a bit. Where are we going to put the simulations? Create a lab of some kind, maybe a high-tech facility. I really couldn't decide. I read some research by Monaco and Reeves. I'm sure you've come across them. They've done a lot of work in this area, and they were talking about context, and so I decided to go for a build of the 17th century manor house, Allthorpe Manor, of Sir Isaac Newton, who made the first working, or practically working, reflecting telescope. The idea had been created before Newton, but Newton made the first useful model, as it were, of it. And all of the simulations are there, and I'll show you some images of that in a moment. You'll see there are, below that, there's an image of some signposts. And this is one of those things in the rationale where the virtual world really has to be able to deliver things that you can't deliver, or be very difficult to deliver at least, in the real world. And so I took advantage of that, and beyond the actual home of the simulations, I built a number of historic telescopes, and the students could wander around. They could get an idea of the way the designs had changed over the years, the sheer scale of some of these things, and there were some simple questions and answers there, but they weren't assessed. It was simply for the students to try out their knowledge from the learning that they'd gained within the Manor House simulations. I'll show you some pictures of those in a little while. There's a small historical caveat. I couldn't help this. I thought, well, I've just got to do it. Just outside the manor house there's an apple tree, and you've, I'm sure, heard the story of Isaac Newton sitting there watching an apple fall, and he began to formulate his theory of gravity. I don't know how true that was, but that's the way the story goes. And the apple tree in the simulator would occasionally drop an apple, and if you go up and touch the apple, you'll get some more information about the relevance of that. Absolutely no importance to the project at all, really. I just felt it was of interest. Learning and assessment, and more importantly, the simulations took the form of, and you'll see them in a moment, 8 different stations that were numbered, and they worked through. We had a brief walkthrough to begin with the students. The blackboard, you can see behind the scale, the measured scale, the rule scale at the front there, explained how to use the simulator. And in this example, they were calculating the focal length of a lens. So where does the light come to a focus if you have a lens or a mirror? And the idea was we would use a dialogue menu, standard Second Life open simulator approach to these things. Click on the board, ask you a question, how the size of the mirror, choose a size, the focal ratio, f6, f10, f12, choose one of those. It then generates the answer in green text, and it will draw, though you can't see it in this picture, a converging cone of light, which is the reflection of the light coming from the mirror to a single point, and it would reach that point at the scale, which is in imperial, because at the time it was all imperial. Once they've understood how to carry out that calculation, they can then click on the book on the left hand page. It will deliver a note card. It will also produce a random question with random values for this particular. They then use those values, type their answer into the note card, name it, save it to their inventory, then drag it from the inventory into the drop box below the book. And I required them to do 2 of these, and having completed the 2, I think I gave them 10% of the marks for their final assessment, their Java programming. So I thought if they were learning and they were proving they were learning, they deserved some reward. So some of the books I've read suggest we should award more, but I was happy with 10%, and it seemed to attract enough interest that they went through that exercise really well. How many of these were there? There we are. These were the various stations around the inside of the manor house. Top left there, the top 3 are the 3 on the left, and the top one in the middle were all used to teach them the actual physical dimensions of the telescope. Okay, the focal length, the length of the tube, the placement of a secondary mirror. If you don't understand these things, you're not a telescope modeler, but these are the things you need to know, and the size of the secondary mirror. And then the lower in the middle and the 3 on the right were all able to simulate the working characteristics, maximum magnification, the ability to separate 2 objects, or resolution, as we call it, that type of thing. So having done these 8 stages, they would then be able to understand and program this into their own application. That was the idea. And as they work through a course, they would be posting their note cards into the Dropbox and getting their 10% of the marks. It seemed to work reasonably well. That the project lasted for about I think it was a calendar month, which is a typical time period during which they would be producing the Java program as well. On this slide, I've got the images of the telescopes I made for them to go and explore and look at. And you can see the size of the avatar against many of them, and the sheer size of these early instruments, some from William Herschel, the Ross telescope out in Ireland, and the Craig telescope balanced on a great tower. Things were very different in the early stages of astronomy when these things were developed, and they could go around there, and again there were some question boards and there were some drop boxes that they could use to test their knowledge, really. If I go on to the next slide for you, I really wanted to get feedback from them, a qualitative analysis, and I set up a questionnaire on our virtual learning environment, and I used a fairly standard 5-point Likert scale. You can see the bullet points there, and the questions, I did write some of my own, but the majority of them, 13 of them in fact, were informed and adapted from a subset of those created by Tanya Joosten and Learning Technology Center, Department of Communication, University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee. So it was a very good survey. There were more than 13 questions there. I just selected a subset of those and added a few of my own, just to get some impression, at least qualitatively, of what they thought. While their views weren't necessarily unanimous, it was certainly very encouraging, and I'm going to run through those with you now so you can have a look at these. You may need to zoom in on the board a bit to get, if you want to actually see the values, but I'll talk us through it anyway. The first category I looked at was the induction. How did they feel about the induction? And you can see there that there's an 80% partial and full agreement that the objectives for the exercises were clearly defined. 20% of the students were neutral about that. They were neither agreeing or disagreeing, but in the majority there was partial and full agreement, they were. So I was reasonably happy with that. There was, of course, as with real-time classes, there is also an attendance issue with online classes. I'm sure you're all aware of that, particularly when having all been through COVID. On 14, I received support to start in my virtual world activities. And you can see there is a 90% partial and full agreement with that. There was just a 10% disagreed partially. But that's encouraging, the fact that there is a majority there in agreement with the question. If you have any questions, by the way, feel free to ask them as we go along or save them till the end. It's entirely up to you. The next group of questions was about the impressions. What were their impressions of this? It's not an easy thing to ask, is it? What is your impression? But the questions here, the way they've been created from the survey I downloaded, were really, really useful. Work in the virtual world was an absorbing experience. The agreement there was only 30%, and 70% were neutral. So that was quite an interesting, and I was surprised that they didn't find it more absorbing. But some of the answers that follow possibly disagree with that. You can determine for yourselves what you think. Working in a virtual world is an enriching experience, and for that there's a 90% partial and full agreement that it was an enriching experience. So that's very encouraging. Question 4, working in a virtual world held my attention. Again, there's a 90% partial and full agreement with that statement. So equally encouraging. Question 5, using a virtual world opened by imagination. We have a 60% score on that, partial and fully agreed, and a 10% disagreeing completely that it actually did open the imagination. Question 9, I was engaged in the virtual world learning experience. Well, that's a good response. It's a 80% partial and full agreement. So that was very encouraging. 20% were neutral. That was quite good. I was pleased with that. And one more question. I didn't want to make the slides too small. Virtual world activities were not challenging. It's a kind of an inverse question, that, so they did have to read it. But we have 60% there partially and fully disagreeing with that statement, indicating that it was challenging, and I'm pleased it was challenging. I didn't want to make things easy, but at the same time I didn't want to make them too difficult either. That would have been very counterproductive when it comes to rolling out learning materials, even of this form. 20% were neutral, 20% agreed partially that in fact they were not challenging. I'll just try and grab that for you. Hold on. Yeah, I agree, Keeper. They were. Okay, looking at this now, the social experience. Now that was an important one because that really did allow us to think about how they were collaborating and how inclusive it was. And again, this type of question makes them think it's in a negative way. There was little opportunity for me to communicate with classmates, and you can see there that there's a 70% partial and full disagreement with that. So they did have a good opportunity, though there's also a 30% partial and complete agreement with the statement. So it was true for about 2/3 of them easily, though not for everyone. Question 17, my classmates and I cooperated in completing assignment work, and you can see there that's a very nice 90% partial and full agreement. So that again, a very encouraging result for the use of the virtual world. Learning activities in the virtual world encourage contact between myself and classmates. A very similar question to one of the earlier ones, that, and we get a 70% score on that partial and full agreement. So that's satisfying for me. 10% were neutral and 20% were partially in disagreement. They didn't feel there was. 19, I did not feel connected to others in the virtual world. It's really the same question being asked in different ways, isn't it? I did not feel connected, but you can see there's a 60% disagreement partially and fully with that statement. And 10% were neutral and 30% were basically partially agreeing and agreeing completely with the statement that they didn't feel connected. The learning experience itself, and this is the one that, you know, that it really is important that they did feel they'd learned something, that it was valuable to them. Using a virtual world, question 7, helped me to think more deeply about the course material, and there is a 60% partial and full agreement there. I mean, I'm admitting that 20% were in full agreement, but at least 40% were in partial, and 40% were neither agreeing or disagreeing with the statement. So they felt neutral about that. The next question, virtual world helped me to better understand concepts. So there we've got a 70% partial and full agreement with that, though most of them partially agreed, I admit that. 20% were neutral, 10% disagreeing partially. 13, the virtual world was beneficial to my learning, 70%, so that's very encouraging really for me, and 40% agreed completely, 30% neither agreed or disagreed. And the question here, 15, I had adequate support in completing my virtual world activity. Well, that really was collaboration between the students, because once they were inducted and oriented into the system, unless there was a system crash, which in fact there wasn't, they had no need to really contact me at all. They learnt among themselves, and that was the whole purpose of it. And 60% there felt that they had adequate support, and that was really from each other rather than from staff. 40% neither agreed nor disagreed with that. Now, how do they feel about the future? Would they take classes in the future with virtual worlds? I would avoid classes in the future, and you can see here that 50% there disagree with that statement. However, you know, just 10% agree completely that they would avoid it, and 40% were feeling neutral about it. They were, in other words, they're quite indifferent if there were virtual worlds there or not. But there was a good number, 50%, who certainly wouldn't. And question 6, I would take another course that made use of virtual worlds. And in a similar way here, 60% agree, either partially or fully, mainly partially, and 40% again were neither in agreement or disagreement with that. So there was a consistency there. But overall, the results for that gave me optimism, as it were, that I could carry on using this But how did it all work out? I mean, this is the thing. What was the final outcome to all this? It's okay getting the feedback, but what were the results? Well, the results I can show you now. These were the results from the assessment, their final piece of coursework for that year, and the number of touch events. So in blue, these are the touch events for each individual student, and in orange, it's the grade they were given for their programming. So their design, their coding, and their testing of the program. It's good in as much as that the grading criteria from a university determined that if you achieved 40% at least, you could have a pass. 55 up to 55%, you could get a merit if you got that. So 55 and 70. If you got 70 and above, then you had a distinction. So above 70 a distinction, 55 to 69 merit, 40 to 55 you had a pass. Now looking at it, the orange bars here, really only one student fell foul of that, 35%. That would have been what we call a referral. They would have given a second chance with a different assignment. It wouldn't have been the same one, of course. But the number of touch events were interesting. Some people, as you can see, G was very, very low, and so was J. And they spoke to me after and said, well, they actually just were there with others, but they weren't necessarily touching on the simulations. They were watching other people's. Well, that's a kind of vicarious learning, and that's fine. As long as they were learning, I was happy with that. The number, if you look at this, there are 12, and if you recall from my introduction about the cohort, there were 14, and it is the reality, I'm afraid, that students do not always hand in their final piece of coursework, and because they did not, this will allow them to, depending upon the circumstances and the reasons for that, either repeat the next year, or they could maybe be given another assignment to finish over a limited time frame by the university. That wasn't our decision. But of the completing students, we had a really good number of distinctions and a really good number of merits. So as far as I was concerned, certainly the learning for the telescope modelling went very, very well. And of course that was backed up by the teaching which had already taken place for the programming component of the actual course. If I just move on to the last slide. I'll put this in here. We don't have to do this. It was just so I thought if you wish to, you could. The actual project is running in Kitely now. It's there. It's fully functional. And if you wish and you have a Kitely account, you can pop over to Azimuth Campus and you can try out all those things for yourself, wander around, look at the telescopes. The link to the research paper is there on ResearchGate, and I have two videos on YouTube. The guided tour is just me walking around, but the Woolsthorpe Manor, Newton's home, there is a video there of students actually using the simulators. So you may want to use those links, look at the videos. You may want to download the research paper, but I would encourage you to pop over to Kitely if you have an account. If not, it's very easy to create one, as it is with Second Life, and have a visit. And I'd be interested to know what you think. Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone. That brings me to an end. If you have any questions, I'd be more than pleased to talk to you about that.
Thank you so much for sharing with us today. Feel free, everybody, to ask questions in either local chat or voice. There was one question in there, was from Keeper asking, what is a touch event? Or
oh, the touch event. That yeah, in virtual worlds. I mean, we in the world of the internet, we talk about click events. In virtual worlds, we talk about touch events. So if you touch on something and it causes some scripted response, then that's the equivalent of a mouse click. But we tend to use the term touch. So just clicks.
Did you have, oh, yeah, where am I here? Oh, they're asking if you can share the slides, and yeah, the slides are actually available over on the board behind us. That if you touch the board, you should get the slide deck. Keeper is asking, did you do any simulations less technical in scope?
Technical in scope. What exactly? In that sense, they were technical in as much as that they had to learn the equations, and they then therefore had to carry out the questions, the answers to the questions using those formulas. That was the idea. It was all formula driven. Not complicated, because wasn't a physics course. That was the important thing that I had to remember. So it was fairly basic telescope design, but certainly adequate for the average amateur. If you wanted to build a telescope, it would let you know the size and the performance of it. Okay, thank you, Shiloh, for that comment.
Oh, I apologize. I was talking and I was muted. Sorry. Go ahead.
Shiloh
Okay.
had a
No, I
question.
just yep.
She's just asking, what kind of curriculum revision are you considering based on the feedback?
The fact that it was successful, it was a successful project. It builds, if you like, evidence for others to actually take part in virtual world work, because it is a learning curve. I'm sure you'd appreciate it is a learning curve, and teachers are used to IT, as we would have called it once upon a time, and they're quite adept at that. It's by no means equal across the scope of staff, but for people to decide they want to work in virtual worlds, it needs evidence, and these types of projects I found do give evidence, and we had some very good successes with European funded projects that we managed to attract to our college, and these were really with SEND students, and it was surprising. They seemed to enjoy it enormously, and the staff there put a great deal of work into it, so they could have a virtual gallery where they could produce their artwork. And we were working with colleges and schools in Holland and Belgium at the time.
Yeah, so Val is asking, do you currently have students here in Second Life, or just in Kitely, or in both worlds?
Oh, right, I see. I don't have students at the moment, I have to say. So I've left the college now, and so I'm more working freelance. So at the moment, I'm not running any projects in Second Life. These are historical ones. This one I ran about 5 years ago.
And Shiloh is asking, have you tried to do a touch telescope like the Hubble or the James Webb, and how light angle might be different, for example?
Right, I haven't done that with the virtual world, no. But there were, when I was teaching a more physics-oriented course, we were doing work with the way that light travels through different substances, and for that I produced simulations using Visual Basic, but not virtual world.
So your simulation is available, still up and running in Kitely, though, correct?
It is. The whole thing is running, yes, in Kitely. It is.
And can I ask, is that simulation available for maybe other instructors to take their students through?
Absolutely. If you wish to use it, then please feel free. Yeah. The thing is now that I don't the the results used to be sent to a database, but they no longer are, because obviously that was just for my students. I wouldn't be recording other people's students' results for them. But you know, if they wish to learn it in a formative way, then it would work absolutely fine.
So for example, I teach a class where I take my class to a bunch of different virtual environments, and I like to find environments that are educational and interactive. So if I could bring my students into your simulation and let them play around with it.
Yes, absolutely.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
please
perfect.
do. Please do.
Liz is asking, how do you see your spaces in virtual worlds now? I know you give tours. Are you interested in doing anything else with them?
I'm still interested in developing these worlds, and I was in contact with one of my colleagues that I used to work with, and he's looking at creating an instance in Kitely as a learning space, and I'd be more than happy to get back into that with him on a voluntary basis, really, so that we can experiment with creating these spaces for different types of student, and it isn't necessarily technical spaces we create either. You know, some of them are art spaces, for instance. I did art galleries the other year where students could vote on each other's artwork, for instance.
Yeah, and Val's asking, Kitely has a pay-as-you-go model, and if you see this as as being an advantage, and I had basically the same question, why Kitely over Second Life, for example?
Oh, the reason for Kitely, the reason went to Kitely was because when we originally started to use Second Life, it was okay with the network team. Should I say that? There were no questions, but slowly as they began to look at the threat landscape, they decided that there were too many ports open to support Second Life, but they were willing to open the ports for Open Simulator. They then objected right at the very end as to Open Simulator because they felt the software was too old, but if I could find somebody running it externally, they would open the port for that. So it's only one port open for Kitely, and that was the reason. It was a technical constraint, security constraint from our networking team. If that answers the question.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's not one. I guess I would have thought that it would also be things like being able to get content in and the cost and I don't know how long ago you got your Kitely regions, but at one point in time you could get 100,000 prims on a region, right? Which is way more than you can here.
Yeah, well, I've got a full island in Kitely, which is very cheap by comparison to Second Life, and I get 15,000 prims, which is ideal for us.
So Val is asking, could she book a group tour to come see the Kitely area if she contacts you later?
Yeah, Val, please do. Please do. I can take you around that, and you can have a play at the simulators and stand up against some of the big old telescopes. Yeah.
I think many of us would be very interested in participating in that tour.
Yeah, please do. I'd be more than pleased to show you around.
Okay. Other questions?
Find the board that we're supposed to touch to get a copy of the slides.
Okay, it says it's kind of behind on if you're facing me, it's over a little bit to the side on the left hand side. It says event and expert series slides and information. It's the last one at the last one at the bottom that you should be able to get.
That's a great question, Tarquin. It's could you actually make lenses, realistic lenses, that perform in the way that normal light would pass through a lens? The converging cones of light that I produced in my simulation, and it's just a simulation, it would appear similar. Yes, it would appear similar, but to be, if you like, real time and almost infinitely variable, which these things are, I'm not sure about that. You run up against the problems of it being virtual and not actually real, I think. But I'm open. I'm open to advances on that view.
Okay, and Val posted the paper in the chat if you're interested in getting Barry's paper, his published paper on it. Well, I think this is a great example, yeah, I'm really looking forward to being able to come take a look at it, and then in the future, probably not this semester, but maybe next semester, coming and bringing my class.
Yeah, please do, and just let me know what you think.
Will do. Is it? It's up all the. It's not up all the time, but when you put in the when you search for it, anybody should just be able to get in, correct?
Oh yes, if you just click on the link and you go to it, it loads on demand, as opposed to Second Life, where the virtual worlds are persistent. They don't actually close down. But with Kitely, if they're not being used, there's nobody on the island. It's basically taken offline. So there's sometimes a delay when you're logging in for about 20 seconds. Yeah.
Right. And is your island set up so that you pay a certain number of whatever the Kitely dollars are, I forgot, for every for each minute that an avatar is in there?
No, it's just a monthly fee.
Just a monthly fee.
Okay. It's a monthly fee, and it only works through PayPal, I've found, unless they've changed that. You just need a PayPal account, and it just uses that.
Okay. Because do you have donation spots on the island anywhere?
I haven't done that. I must admit, I do have in a couple of my Second Life islands, but in the Kitely one I haven't. No, not at present.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Comments? So I have a couple more things to announce here, and then we can go over to the deck there and get some food and discuss some more. But I wanted to thank you for sharing with us, and I want to thank everybody who joined us. And I did want to remind everybody that you can find a recording of today's presentation on the VWEC YouTube channel, which I'm going to post into the chat here. And please know that we welcome new volunteers to help VWEC, which is open to anyone interested in teaching and learning in virtual environments. And if you are interested in working in at our info center, you can contact Sue Moon Magic or Val Librarian Greg. I'll put their names in here as well. These are the avatar names. We will be having our next expert series on April 25th, and the session is called Fighting Censorship in Louisiana Libraries. Very current topic right now, and that will be presented by Bunny Bernstein. To see all the events, please check out the VWEC Plaza events calendar, which I'm posting into the chat. And again, the YouTube and social media information here. So you can follow us in lots of different places. And then again, please join us for our Friday happy hour at the end of the deck for informal Q&A. Thanks so much, and let's give Skipper a big hand.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.